Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 7. Benedict Spence is here with me. We're having a look at the front pages of the papers. The Times this morning, Benedict, has got a great story, Green anti-Semitism storm. And this is following on from the local elections where we saw the Green Party seemingly infiltrated by people, shall we say, who might not have had climate change as the number one subject on their agenda.
Yes, the gentleman who stood there and started shouting about Palestine and shouted Allahu Akbar. And you're sort of thinking, OK, is that how a power plant works? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But
what are your views on cycle lanes?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know what it is about, left-wing fringe parties that just keeps attracting these people, but they do like clockwork. And thankfully, Green parties have yet to make sort of any major inroads into British political life. But as you say,
but they may win a couple of seats this time around.
They might. But it is increasingly, I think, it is being used as a vehicle for this sort of thing. And you have to be honest here. You can't then just say, well, that's coming from migrant communities. Actually, the Pakistani community in the north of England. It's obviously being facilitated by the sort of the trendy middle class white people actually in London, because there's a lot of sympathy, I think, for the Palestinian cause on that side of the left, and therefore there is a lot of preparedness, if you like, to tolerate this sort of thing. But the story is interesting because it's backed pro-Palestinian protests at Auschwitz, for instance, Green Party members.
And also shared what's called offensive material online.
And you just think, what on earth... I mean, we all know what's wrong with these people. They're anti-Semites, obviously. But how is it that in a post-Holocaust, post-Second World War Western country, not only that, the one that was involved in D-Day, the one that fought the Nazis the most successfully, how can it be that this is being accepted in modern society? And it is being accepted. That's the thing.
And as many as 20 candidates they're looking at here.
Well, that's the thing. That's not an anomaly. That's a pattern. And it's not enough that we here in London go, oh, well, isn't this terrible? This is being tolerated at some level on a national basis. And we've seen this, of course, with the Labour Party having to go through its great sort of anti-Semitism issues and having to deselect people in the Rochdale by-election. Of course, it had to get rid of its candidate because it turned out he had some pretty fruity opinions on Israel. Where this came from, I don't entirely understand. I suspect mass migration's had something to do with it. But we have to understand.
I think you'd have to say that.
Yeah, people do not necessarily come to the West and automatically adopt Western values if their entire upbringing is based around this particular form of hatred. And I thought that the poll that came out day before yesterday that said more than half of 18 to 24-year-olds in the UK agree with the statement the state of Israel has no right to exist was very telling about the direction of travel that we're going in.
Absolutely right, and it goes all the way back to education as well. The Telegraph's got a piece talking of Palestine. Keir Starmer committing in Labour's manifesto to recognise a Palestinian state before peace talks are over, which is interesting enough what Angela Rayner was saying, if you remember, in that sort of rather curious group meeting that she seemed to be having with a lot of Muslim, sort of faith leaders up in the north of England.
Where she was the only woman.
Where she was the only woman, and she was saying, if I could do something about the situation, I would resign if that would help, but we will recognise Palestine.
Yeah, honestly, I find it incredibly concerning that the Labour Party would indulge in sectarian politics like this. Because, again, what does it say to Britain's Jewish community, many of whom are staunch critics of Israel, it must be said. But this sort of, intimidation, this sort of bullying
but who also don't
see.
Vote for a local candidate in their constituency based on their policy in the Middle East.
Well, it's funny that, isn't it? Because you'd have thought a good sign of integration, of an integrated community, would be that they accept British values, what's in British interests, rather than going, here's a far-off war that has nothing to do with us. Absolutely, you must take a stance on this. But there are certain communities that do that, and it's the thing that I always have to say on this particular subject. It's Israel-Palestine today, and it's a big issue amongst the Pakistani and the Bangladeshi communities in the UK. What happens when inevitably there's tension between India and Pakistan, and there is pressure put on politicians to come out against India, who are our allies, much like Israel, a much more important country, I must say. What are the Labour Party going to do then? They won't, having set this precedent, be able to turn around and go, no, absolutely not, we're not going to listen to you, because they've shown to these people, oh yes, we will absolutely cave to your demands because we desperately crave your vote. It's a really dangerous precedent.
It really is. You're absolutely right. On the more domestic level today, we've got Jeremy Hunt saying 700,000 families could get a £1,500 boost because they're going to put the child benefit limit from £60,000 per household up to £120,000.
Yeah,
it's very generous of them.
It's very generous. That's over £1 billion.
If you've got children.
Over £1 billion, that's going to cost the taxpayer. I was under the impression we didn't have billions to just be
I didn't
throwing
think so.
around. And it's one of those tricky things where I think, on the one hand, we've got a demographic crisis. This is partly why the Tories have been able to justify mass migration, because we're not having enough children. So you do need to find ways of making people have enough children. But at the same time, I really don't think that it's entirely fair to just be sort of turning around at this last moment and say, oh yes, here's this massive giveaway for people when there are X many number of things that we can't afford. Oh, and by the way, under this Conservative government, we have the highest tax burden in the post-war period, including a marginal rate of 70% if you happen to fall between 100 and 120,000 pounds, which you just think, who on earth came up with that idea?
I know, absolutely mad. Rachel Reeves is in the Daily Mail. It says that basically she's plotting 10 to 12 tax hikes in the budget. You know, I've spoken about this before, including capital gains tax and all manner of different sorts of VAT rises, and also maybe property tax as well.
Again, though, how on earth do people expect things to function in this country if we have no economic growth, if there's no wealth creation? Both parties are just absolutely determined to tax everybody to the hilt. Why? To keep services just about on their feet. Whereas actually the reality is this country is grinding to a halt. That's why things aren't working, because the tax pot isn't as big, but the population is expanding. That's why these things aren't working. How is it that they can't see that? But ultimately also, why is it that the electorate isn't putting more pressure on both parties? All the time we're told that polls show actually people are happy to endure higher taxes if their services work. Do people not understand?
I'm not one of them, by the way.
Well,
exactly. Correct that
I suspect most people who listen to this show are not.
Right.
But do these people who do want that, do they not understand that unless you actually spur growth, long term, even medium term, your services will continue to get worse?
Yes, exactly. And you can't tax people if they're not making any more money at the end of the day. I mean, speaking of mass migration, I suppose we should mention, and it sort of shows what state we're in, to say that this is not really a big story. 84 migrants rescued from the Channel yesterday attempted to cross bizarrely on D-Day when we're commemorating people going the other way.
One of the many reasons, there are many reasons why Nigel Farage has proved very popular in the last couple of days, why people will vote for him in large numbers. That is perhaps the best reason there encapsulated. He was the one that was talking about this years ago, actually, when it first became a problem, because it's been a problem since 2018, 2019. Nobody has done anything about it. I think even Rishi Sunak's closest advisor, James Forsyth, wrote in The Spectator a couple of years ago, immigration isn't a problem anymore. The voters don't care about it. Well, boy, has he been proven wrong. And of course, that's Rishi Sunak's right-hand man. Again, more people coming. These aren't even the people we're talking about legally. Illegally, very little is being done about it. When all eyes were on the English Channel yesterday, of all the days that you could have stopped it, yesterday would probably have been the day, and yet.
Yes, indeed. We should talk about Michael Mosley as well, missing in Greece. An extraordinary story, really, which broke sort of late yesterday afternoon. He's on the front page of the Daily Mail. They call him the male health guru. A man who's spent most of his life, telling everybody else how to live, and it's a tragic story. He seems to have vanished. It seems incredible.
He does, and the authorities there fear that he might have taken a fall off a cliff or something like that. So that does not suggest that they have very high hopes that he will be found, which is really awful, because he's a very infectious character. I think that he's very optimistic. He is you'd say he is nanny state, but he doesn't browbeat you about it. He goes, this is what you shouldn't do, but I'm going to be I'm not going to sort of tell you how to. Exactly. I think he's managed, one of the few media doctors who managed to straddle quite a fine line of getting the tone right, whilst being sort of upfront about health conditions. And obviously we really hope that he is found, because it's a dreadful thing, and I really do feel for what his family has to go through right now.
A couple of other stories to mention. Bus lanes make councils £80 million a year. Probably the least surprising story today, but still infuriating when you read it.
Oh, honestly, it's such a scam, isn't it? The way that actually people are being penalised for these, for straying into a bus lane for a few seconds, and they can afford to put a camera right there. They will never fix the potholes in whatever city you live in, but they will put the very expensive camera right there to make sure that if you stray even slightly into that lane, you will be fined. And honestly, you just think actually it's a bit of a cliche, isn't it, that this country is becoming increasingly unfriendly towards motorists. In London, we know that almost more than anywhere else, but you're seeing it elsewhere as well. Even places like Oxford, everybody knows about being
it's getting worse all over the place.
It is, and honestly, it's the fact of the matter is that authorities feel they can target motorists, because what are you going to do? Stop using your car? Of course not. People can't afford to, so they will continue to take your money.
Absolutely. Stephen Fry's apologised to the Lords.
Yeah, it's really interesting, this, isn't it? That sort of very trendy people sort of fall into line with whatever is the cause of the day. So this is Lords, it's being too white, too male, too pale, too stale. And people aren't very happy about this, and so he's been forced to backtrack. But he was the same man who said about the Garrett Club, it's about time that they should really have women. I joined however many years ago, and I hadn't realised that there were no women, and now I'm really outraged by it. It's always this really, whatever is trendy of the day, and celebrities like that are prepared to trash the traditions of it, and for a short-term media boost. I'm very glad to see that he has had to apologise, because it's about time that somebody had to climb down from one of these trendy positions.
Exactly right. Benedict, thank you very much indeed. A couple of other stories to get to. Of course, we will get to them, including